Each week, nearly a dozen movies are released theatrically. 40 films a month, more than 400 a year. That's a plethora of cinema. Too much cinema. You'd have to be an addict to see all that, but don't fret. We've got you covered. This is CinemAddicts.
Okay, continuing our year-end fun. I know I've done my top 5 lists, I guess you'd say, but I thought I'd throw in a little bonus, which is my top 10 horror movies of the year. Of the three of us, Greg, myself, and Eric, I'm probably the most a fan of horror. I do love a good horror movie, and many years my top movie of the year is a horror movie. This year, I would say it is kind of a horror movie. If you know my top 5, you know what that is. And I think in most people's lists, it's categorized as, I don't know, sci-fi horror-ish, body horror at least for sure. You guys know what it is. I'll get to it in a couple minutes, but I'm not going to go into huge detail on it. Anyway, my top 10 horror movies for the year. Before I do that, I will give you my overrateds just really quickly. These are movies I mostly liked, but I thought kind of really got praised more than I enjoyed them. One of those is Oddity. I did like it quite a bit, but people loved it. I know Greg loved it. And for me, it just didn't quite hit on all accounts. It felt like I had all the elements. I enjoyed the experience, but I wanted more from it. I wanted to do more. I don't know what it was, but I was just slightly underwhelmed, but I would recommend. Late Night with the Devil, same thing. People loved the movie. For me, it was a lot of presentation, but when the actual story, the actual movie didn't engage me that much. And I remember at the time kind of complaining, and I kind of feel the same way still, that it was almost too good of a recreation of 70s late night shows, which I don't find very entertaining. So if it would have been less a late night 70s show, I think I might have enjoyed it more. I'm very, very much on the minority on that opinion. Once again, I would recommend it though. I think it's a good movie. The only movie in my overrateds that I think I wouldn't really recommend, for me at least, was In a Violent Nature. And people loved In a Violent Nature, and I love a weird, artsy, alternate version of horror, things that are doing things differently. I love those kind of movies. And In a Violent Nature is one of those, and I just talked about a movie recently. If you listen to this show, I'm talking about a movie that I consider like a walking video game style movie. In a Violent Nature is literally a video walking game of a Jason-like character walking and sometimes killing people. It should be right in my wheelhouse, but something about it just didn't work. I just wasn't engaged by the world. I know the same things that engage me in those kind of movies, the tone and the mood and the environment, people loved it and really tapped into it. And for me, it just did not work at all. I just kind of felt almost trolled. So I guess I feel how I understand how the other side feels. And then a few near misses. One of them is Nosferatu. Only a near miss because I haven't seen it yet. I'm probably going to see it the next couple days. I would almost guarantee it'll be in my top 10 for the year. I'm sorry, you're too late, Nosferatu. So I will have to praise you later. But I know Greg has it as it's like, I think number 2 or number 3 for the year. So I can't imagine that Nosferatu, with the history of Eggers, isn't going to be on my list for top 10 horrors of the year. But I can almost guarantee, could be famous last words, I can almost guarantee that Nosferatu will not be my top movie of the year, no matter what. And it won't be my top horror of the movie of the year, no matter what, because I don't think anything's going to replace that. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. You never know. So that was a near miss. Smile 2, probably the biggest surprise of the year of a movie that I did not expect to be great at all. It ended up being really solid. Smile 2 is great. You'll Never Find Me, a really good movie. What else did I have? Oh, I had the first Omen, also really big surprise that such a late, you know, entry on the franchise was so good. I guess it would kind of win the Prey award for latest entry in a franchise that ended up being really, really, really solid. And I'm sure there's a few other ones that I'm forgetting, but those are the ones that kind of struck me as near misses. Now, quickly, let's get to the top 10. And I try to pick a few that maybe haven't come up on other lists, so that way you might have some other interesting, maybe some gems out there that you haven't caught. The first one is definitely one of those, and I think it might be on Prime still. It might be leaving Prime too soon, but I can't imagine this isn't going to show up a lot of different places. That is the movie Monolith. And before I go on, I will quickly mention, like I did in my other lists, you're going to look at IMDb. And some of these are going to find have different years than 2024. They are 2024 for me. If they ever released to the mass public, the mass American public, we're easily able to get it some way, digitally, in theaters, somehow, in the year 2024. That's what I consider it. Not when it got to a festival or if it was released in another country for a few months before it got to America. It may still be 2024 in my book. I believe Monolith is one of those movies. Directed by Matt Vesely or Vesely. I think it's Australian production, and Lily Sullivan, who you know from Evil Dead Rise, is the almost sole star of this movie, although I believe there's a couple other people that pop up in it. I might be hazier on this movie than some because I saw this, I think, in January, so this is probably the oldest movie on my list. A really cool, it's almost one of those screen movies, movies where it's entirely on the computer screen. It's kind of almost one of those where she is doing a podcast, and I know podcast that's also terrible in movies usually, but somehow it works here because you get to hear her voice a lot. It's almost like she's storytelling to us while we're solving this kind of mystery, and the mystery involves these like little obelisks, like these black plain columnar figurine kind of a thing. It doesn't even have a shape that's recognizable as anything much. Like obelisk, I think is a better description. Almost like a mini thing from 2001, but a little different shape. And there's a whole series of people who have received these anonymously, and there's a mystery around them. And she's trying to research through interviews with different people who've received one, through reports, through internet searches, through just all these different means, trying to figure out what these things are and what they mean. And you might guess she gets one. And I love that kind of almost sci-fi, thrillery, weird sort of mystery thing, but there's kind of a horrific element. So I think this is kind of a borderline get on the horror list kind of a movie, but I think it fits. And I really enjoyed it. I think this is a movie that's just kind of got under my skin, was really satisfying. This is kind of what I love from a surprise gem indie kind of movie, and I really dug its tone as well. And her presence was very different here than it was in Evil Dead Rise, and I think she had to really carry the show, and I think she did a great job in it. So I would say Monolith. Go check that one out. Pretty cool. Number 9 was Getaway, one I just saw in the last month or so, directed by Stefan Hars, with Nick Frost, Aisling B, and a whole bunch of other people, which I did not write all the names down. This is one of those movies where you think it's one thing and it becomes something else. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil that here. What it is throughout, though, is kind of social satire, almost veering into broad humor, but mostly staying in this kind of people, a normal family, kind of this average family, British, entering this Scandinavian small island community who has this sort of folk tale of revenge against the intruding Brits. So they're literally going into a place that probably hates them, and they're going to see this kind of this festival and recreation of this historical event, this kind of folk event that they have every year. And it's one of those, oh, you are in our small town. We're looking at you, stranger. We don't like you. We're suspicious of you. One of those where everyone in the small town seems crazy and weird and creepy, and yet your characters are still there in that town. That's what this movie is with the Nick Frost and his family. And it plays out as a good version of one of those movies, entertaining enough, but there's a twist that it takes that really made it even more entertaining to me. There's a pretty great social like I said, commentary and a pretty great needle drop on an Iron Maiden song that I thought was very, very well used that you don't hear much in movies, at least. I enjoyed this quite a bit, Getaway. And I think we had screeners of it, but I'm pretty sure this is either on Shudder or hopping onto a streaming service like really soon. So you should have access to this very quickly. Number 8, which I believe is on Hulu now, is Tillman Singer's Cuckoo. Came out in the summer. Got a lot of kind of little buzz behind it, but it was right on the tail of another movie that's on my list, and kind of fell by the wayside. And also, I think this movie was just a little bit too weird for people. This movie looks weird, but I think it's even weirder than it looks. And I think for a lot of people that was really unsatisfying. They were just like, they didn't know how to take this movie. It's kind of part giallo, but all the weirdness of giallo and not much of the murder of giallo. So I think that's a hard sell to people. It's because giallo without the murder is like porn without the porn. You just get the actors doing weird stuff and then nothing happens. Kind of the same thing in Giallo. If you don't get the murders, you're like, what is this movie? It's already weird. I don't no murder. Hunter Schafer and Dan Stephens are kind of the standouts in this movie. And basically, you've got Hunter's character arriving at this weird, I want to say Swiss, if I remember correctly, the Swiss sort of a resort, but there's really weird and dark. I keep saying the word weird, but that really truly applies here. Dark activities going on at this resort, and she is this moody teenager stuck there with her family, doesn't want to be there. Her not her step family. I think it's her actual mother, stepfather, if I remember correctly, or it's reversed. Maybe it's her. I forget the exact arrangement, but one of her real parents has died, and she's with her other real parent and their step family, and doesn't really want to be with them. Is still feeling really messed up from that situation, and is stuck in this, Swiss Alps resort with strange goings on and just wants to be out of there. And this mystery slowly presents itself to her. And boy, this is one of those movies, kind of like Die Hard or something, where your main character just gets beat up by the end. It just doesn't, they're not superhero-ish at all. And I love the oddness of this movie, and it just keeps getting stranger and stranger. And by the time it gets to the end, I feel like a lot of people hopped off the ship because it just became too much for them. And I kept digging in. I kept taking another spoonful of what Cuckoo was giving me. So I loved it quite a bit. Number seven, which is on Prime, I believe, right now, is Lisa Frankenstein by Zelda Williams, which is Robin Williams' daughter as the director. Written by Diablo Cody, which tell you a lot, whether you like it or not. I tend to actually like Diablo Cody's writing and her style, but I know a lot of people find it too self-conscious, too look at me writing, too quirky with a capital Q. I tend to kind of go for it. So I think if you're a fan of Diablo Cody, this might be one you look into. And I do want to point out the main star as Lisa is Catherine Newton. Catherine Newton she is poised for greatness. She's been getting a ton of roles, and she's kind of quietly putting in great different performances in different roles and doing a lot of genre work. I think she was also in Abigail this year. Abigail could have made my near misses. Abigail was a lot of fun. Sorry, Abigail's not on my top 10. And Catherine Newton, you should keep an eye on her, but she has to carry this movie, and I think she does a great job. This is on a lot of bottom lists this year, and I don't get it. And I guess it's that quirk factor for me. This is kind of one of those almost on the edge of a Tim Burton-esque type of story, but done really, really well. Where Lisa is this 80s, it's a very 80s movie. It's retro. She's a very kind of goth girl. Very, like I said, Beetlejuice-ish, where you've got the main character girl being really like an outcast and kind of gothy and not very social. And that's sort of Lisa Frankenstein, and literally ends up with a dead dude come back to life, skulking in the corner of a room. And this is almost like E.T., like hidden in a room. And slowly let's just say she's getting pieces for him that he might be missing, that might not be working right for him. And boy, I loved a lot of this movie. I thought it was just crackling fun throughout, and just hit all the right notes for me. A lot of people did not. So I guess proceed with caution. I was also surprised that I liked it as much as I did. And number six, the other movie that I talked about on my other top list that I think kind of has some Tim Burton-esque elements to it. I won't go through a whole description again, but that's Humanist Vampire Seeking Consenting Suicidal Person. Once again, the title almost gives you the idea of it. We do have a great lead performance by Sarah Monpetit as the humanist vampire. This is also directed by Ariane Louise Sieyès. Great, great, great movie. I love this movie quite a bit. Even more than Lisa Frankenstein, this one just really hit me with great characters I rooted for. And even though it's a highly unrealistic kind of world, you still got emotionally invested in these characters, and they felt real within their version of the world. And I loved that about it. And I think that the humanist vampire, it sounds like it could be way too quirky and way too ridiculous. And I mean, I just loved her character and I really, really rooted for her. I really wanted her to achieve what she wanted to achieve, which is getting blood and surviving as a vampire without having to kill people because she doesn't want to kill people. And then just how that plays out was kind of surprising and very satisfying to me. And just throughout the movie, I found it very, very much a pleasant surprise. Go check that one out. I think you can just rent it right now, but I feel like this is one that would definitely pop up on a Hulu or someplace like that pretty soon if it hasn't already. All right, number five, top five, stop motion. I know a lot of people like this movie. A lot of people didn't fully like it because this movie is quite disgusting and hard to get into, very dark and just a little off-putting, I would say, literally and visually. But for me, it really worked. And that's directed by Rupert Morgan. I do want to point out the lead performance once again by Aisling Franciosi. She of the Nightingale, also amazing and hard to watch movie from a few years ago. If you haven't seen that, by the director of The Babadook, The Nightingale is something amazing. Not really a horror movie, but horrific. Stop motion, quite a cool and weird little movie. This to me is the epitome of what you want from a weird, or from a, I'm gonna stop saying weird so much in this, from a horror indie movie. It gives you something you haven't quite seen before. It goes places you maybe wouldn't go at all in a big budget studio movie. You probably aren't going to get this created at all. The director, Robert Morgan, is a stop motion animator at heart, at by trade. You know, that's their bread and butter. So the fact that they, come into this as a director of a regular old, film movie and have this stop motion background makes it great because there are quite a few stop motion sequences in this movie, and not surprisingly, they are really, really cool and really well done. The best way to describe the stop motion in here and whether you like it is that they very much feel in that kind of tone and look and grossness of those videos by Tool back in the I want to say the 90s. I think they're all in the 90s, maybe early thousands, but 90s mostly. We had those Tool videos where the figurines almost look like they're made out of meat. That's kind of how the stop motion figures in here look. But the main character, she is a stop motion protege of her domineering mother. And as she works on her own, as the daughter works on her own project, she becomes more and more isolated and more mentally, let's say, unhinged. And her stop motion work starts to, I guess, reflect that. And also, things may or may not be happening in reality for her with the stop motion. You're not quite sure, or maybe you are quite sure, depends on how you interpret the movie. I would say also shades of something like Repulsion in here kind of works with it as well. I think it's really cool and creepy and genuinely unnerving. And it may not be the most blood and gore in a movie, but it might be the most like ooh affecting cringe, like makes you want to ooh, have that feeling when you see the gore in this movie. There's something about the way the gore is done here that just seems, I guess you hear the term visceral. It really does feel like that. It's like I said, it's not the most over the top, but it's that kind of gore that gets you. I don't know how you guys are, but like for me, I could see this really big gory sequence in a movie and be like, that was cool, but didn't really freak me out. But then I can see a movie where, I don't know, someone just cuts their finger, like in The Thing, they cut their finger with a scalpel to do that blood test. And that's almost the most cringe-inducing moment in the movie in all this gore. So this movie has that effect to me. There's a couple moments in here where there's some gore, and it just is like, whoa, whoa, boy, oh boy, that that was unpleasant, you know. And of course, that makes it number five. Number four. This is a movie that's on probably no one's list. I think it comes up in IMDb as 2022. It did not come out here or anywhere I know of in 2022. It is also, I believe, on Apple TV and might be available on Prime. You'd have to look, but I think this is available for y'all. Y'all, I'm in Alabama. What can I say? I've adopted them, y'all. Disappear Completely by Louis or Luis. It's probably Luis Javier Hanane, starring Santiago Mendoza. He is the star of this movie. This movie is completely unique, completely untalked about. I think it's a really cool little horror movie that people missed out on. That's why it's my number four. This movie is about he's kind of like a tabloid photographer almost in the what was oh my gosh, my brain has forgot the name of the movie now. The movie with Gyllenhaal, where he's out just being this creepy, like trying to get to the scene first and get his photography. I know it's going to drive me crazy. I think it's the favorite movie of Jack Fitzpatrick. Sorry, Jack. It stuck out. It went out of my brain. But you know the movie. Anyway, he's one of those kind of characters in Mexico City, if I remember correctly, and he gets to a crime scene early and sneaks into this big mansion and finds the crime scene, has taken photos and everything before the police get there. And what he comes across a crime scene or a suicide, you're not sure, or is it? I'm not going to quite tell you, but there's something supernatural or almost demonic looking about the scene and where it happened. And let's just say that that starts to affect his life. Things start to happen to him based on him photographing this crime scene and being at this crime scene. And this movie came out of nowhere for me. It got its hooks in me, and the tone and the performance and the way he starts to unravel. And this is a great unraveling movie. If you like those movies where a character starts out kind of knowing where their place is in the world and they slowly, it's torn down around them. This is one of those movies for sure. And I think it's really, really effectively done. And bring up movies like Seven, where you have this kind of the whole tone and ambiance of the entire movie just kind of drips with this kind of evil, decrepit dread. I mean, this isn't visually to the degree of a Fincher is doing in Seven, but on its own independent level, I think that the feeling of dread and the feeling of just everything is just crumbling for this character is just really, really well done. And there's some very interesting sound work in this movie. I'll leave it at that, but it was quite something. And I think Greg, I don't know if Eric saw this movie. I think Greg did, and I think Greg liked it quite a bit too. Disappear Completely. If you haven't heard of that movie, I would advise if you're a horror fan, you go check it out. I think it might be a really cool little gem for you to discover. All right, I'm going to go pretty quickly through the next one because I've talked about it pretty fully. That is number three is Red Rooms by Pascal Plante, French Canadian, I do believe, and Juliette Garipi is the main star of this movie. Red Rooms is fantastic. It is half courtroom drama, half, dark web investigation. It's half obsessed super fan of crime by the main character who will literally camp out every night to get into this trial of this, you know, apparently evil murderer who has been doing stuff in red rooms. If you don't know what red rooms are, this movie will explain it to you. They are almost like snuff films. They are almost legendary, possibly not real things on the dark web, but possibly real because a lot of times things that are based on some kind of reality. And if they are real, they are horrifying to think of. And this movie really taps into that horror and why are people super fans of true crime to the point that they become obsessed or even, I don't know, in love with killers? There's a lot of interesting psychology going on here. This is one of those movies that is not very bloody, but its implications are extremely horrifying, and the way it's told, I think, is it's really, really engaging. For some, it'll be a little less engaging because it might not have enough action and stuff going on, but I think this is a fantastic movie with some great reveals and some really enigmatic moments that make you wonder exactly what are the motives of the main character. And that mystery of the main character is the whole point of the story. Like, what is the point? What is this main character after? What is their deal? And whichever way you come down on that person, I think it's a quite engaging trip. And that's Red Rooms. Number two for me is Longlegs. A lot of people hated Longlegs. A lot of people loved Longlegs. A lot of people said this is the most overrated movie of the year and the most overhyped movie of the year. It definitely was hyped to heck. It had a very crazy, campaign online and in the media and all over the place. They really definitely put a big push on this movie. But for whatever reason, this movie hit me and worked. I think this is one of those movies that either works or doesn't work for you because it is, to some, going to be way too slow, way too boring, and way too leading to nothing. But to me, I found it to be an amazing little puzzle box of a movie. And I know that some people love the puzzle boxes that Nolan does, and I don't usually. But I kind of love this sort of puzzle box. So it just depends on kind of what your deal is. Longlegs, directed by Osgood Perkins. Mike and Moreau is the main character. You also have Nick Cage, Blair Underwood, and some other people. This movie for me is just a masterclass of super dark, super slow, super quiet, brooding tone, except for the crazy Nick Cage outbursts, which for me, in some to some degree, is the hardest to latch onto because it's the most kind of pull you out of the movie moments are Nick Cage, almost too overdone, you know. But I kind of love it too, and I think that's kind of make or break for a lot of people is the long legs character, and if he just takes them fully out of the movie, which I get, totally get it. For me, I went with it, and I liked it. But the stuff that I love in this movie is Micah Monroe, and really the movie is about her. It's not really about long legs. It's about her and her deluded, and I have a whole video where I talk about what I think this movie's about, so you can listen to it if you want to. Her deluded self, I guess I'm being not very articulate here. Her deluded view of what her role in the world is. And the movie, I think, is about her discovery of what she is really doing in the world versus what she thinks she's doing in the world. And on top of that, there's some just visually really creepy, interesting moments. There's a whole thing around dolls in this movie that also draws people out of the movie as super fake and unrealistic. And I think it's just fantastic. I love that kind of stuff. I love scenes in movies like this where they are creeping into a barn and discovering something weird. That, there's moments in here that people kept describing as Seven or Silence of the Lambs. I also got The Ring. I got a lot of feeling of The Ring in this movie, you know, like just something is creepy and not right in this world, and I love that about this movie. Longlegs is my number two horror movie for 2024, and number one, I've talked about it way too much. I will not to try to talk about it too much here. But if you haven't guessed, which you probably already have, if you know anything about my stuff, if you don't, and you're just coming out from nowhere, well, hello, I'm on CinemAddicts, and check out our stuff. We have a weekly broadcast as well as tons and tons of videos and audio stuff. CinemAddicts. That's like addicts, like you're addicted to something. CinemAddict. So, in case you're trying to look that up, it might be kind of hard if you don't get that spelled right. And that is number one, The Substance. I think it's gotten buzz. I don't think it's overrated. I think it's still underrated. I think that a lot of people fall off at the end of The Substance. They think it is just way too over the top and crazy at the end. They think it's just goofy at the end, and I adore the end. This is one of the, if not the best body horror movies ever made. And yeah, even better than Cronenberg, because Cronenberg has great body horror, but a lot of those aren't great stories. I'm sorry, Cronenberg. I do enjoy a lot of your stuff, but a lot of your body horror movies aren't great stories. Videodrome, very interesting, but kind of a mess. This movie, I don't think is a mess. Some people do. Directed by Coralie Farge. I'm terribly pronouncing that name, sorry. Demi Moore, who better get an Oscar nomination, or she is going to be right in horror the horror performance of the year that never gets nominated for an Oscar. I believe this is unfortunately probably will be Demi Moore, but Demi Moore deserves an Oscar nomination for this. Honestly, she should probably get a win because she's just over the top in this movie. Margaret Qualley should get a supporting Oscar nomination for this. Dennis Quaid, not so much, but he's really fun at what he does. I don't think it's like a fantastically crazy performance, but Margaret Qualley and Demi Moore, arguably co-leads, but Demi's really the lead, I think, in this. She has more change and more going on. Plus, they are the same. If you watch The Substance, you know they are the same. This is on Mubi. You can also rent it. I will be buying this on some form of physical media. Hopefully, I think it's supposed to be coming out in January, so I'm holding out for that. But The Substance is fantastic. Story of a fading star, Elizabeth Sparkle, destined to go down as one of the iconic characters in film history, especially horror history. I think you will know Elizabeth Sparkle. Elizabeth Sparkle is a name that should be recognized for the ages. Fading starlet, fired from her position Seeing the world being younger and more beautiful around her, she is presented with the opportunity to try this new, quote, the substance, which promises to make a new and better version of herself, which it literally does. And the way it plays out is fantastic. This is half Black Mirror, Twilight Zone, half, I don't even want to say half Society. I can say Society. There's another one I compare it to I want to say because I think it gives something away. Let's just say the many changes that poor, poor? Is she poor? Is it her, or she, is she the villain in her own life? And, and the protagonist? Is she the villain and the hero? Maybe. The changes she goes through, literally and figuratively, are immense and fantastic and just always engaging to watch. And visually, this movie is bold. It's as bold as a punch to the face. You see it coming, but you can't avoid it, and it still makes an impact. And I think that is something to do. It's hard to make a movie that is so bold, that wears its heart so much on its sleeve, that says exactly what it's about with big, giant, bold capital letters, and still somehow is surprising and still somehow works and still somehow has tons of things to say that are relevant to the world. And I think it continues to be relevant because I think this is a pretty timeless movie, although it's timeless and also timely at the same time. You know what I mean? Like it's really for this time and for this moment in time, but I think we'll also have themes that work forever. I don't think it'll ever be obsolete. Once again, The Substance, a classic movie in my opinion. One of the movies this year that I think will always be one of my favorite movies. I love The Substance so much, and that is my top horror movie of 2024. I'm sure I missed some, or I'm sure I included some that you think are ridiculous. How did I forget that? How did I include that? I am so wrong. I guess you'll have to tell me. Or maybe I'm so right. You can tell me that too. I don't need you to tell me that because, hey, we can all have our lists. It's cool. If we love movies, love them. You know, it's like music. It doesn't make it cool or bad if someone likes something different than you like, or you like something they don't like. I mean, really, this list should just be out there so you could be like, whoa, I never heard of that. That sounds cool. Or, oh, I saw that, but I didn't think it was going to be that interesting. Maybe I'll go check it out. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. And hey, if we agree, cool. We can talk about it. Look forward to seeing you on the other side, 2025.